The first time Karen Thompson, the president of the Pinecrest Gardens HOA, pulled into our driveway in her shiny black SUV, I knew trouble was coming. I was watering my mother's prized rose garden, a spot she and my late father had nurtured together for years. It was one of the few things that still brought her peace, especially as her health had been deteriorating lately. Karen rolled her window down just an inch, as if the air around my house might contaminate her precious leather seats. "Alex, those garden gnomes violate Section 8, Paragraph 12 of our community guidelines," she said, her voice dripping with fake politeness. "They need to be removed by Friday or you'll be fined." I frowned, glancing at the 8 small gnomes standing proudly in our flower beds. My father had gifted one to my mother every year on her birthday. They weren't just decorations, they were memories. "They've been here for years," I countered. "No one's ever complained before." Karen's smile didn't quite reach her cold, calculating eyes. "Rules are rules. I've been lenient, but the board insists. Remove them, or it'll be a $200 fine per gnome." That was $1,600 we didn't have, not with my mother's medical bills piling up. I swallowed my anger and forced a nod. "I'll take care of it." Karen's SUV reversed out of the driveway, kicking up dust. I watched her go, my gut twisting in unease. Something about her visits always left a stain on her home. That night, I carefully wrapped each gnome in newspaper and stored them in the garage. As I shut the door, a sense of finality settled over me, like I'd buried a piece of our happiness. Little did I know, this was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, Karen found new reasons to fine us. First, it was our mailbox, the wrong shade of blue. I repainted it. Then it was the bird feeder, too large. I replaced it. Then, the wind chimes, a noise disturbance. I took them down. Each time Karen visited, my mother's condition got worse. Her hands began trembling, and she struggled to stay awake for more than a few hours at a time. Dizziness, nausea, memory lapses. At first, I thought it was just stress, but then came the night she collapsed. I found her slumped over the kitchen table, her breathing shallow. I rushed her to the ER. After hours of tests, the doctor came back with no answers. "It could be a viral infection," he suggested, "or possibly something environmental. Have there been any recent changes in your home?" I thought about Karen, the constant harassment, the way my mother's health declined after every visit. I shook my head. Nothing I can think of. But deep down, something felt off. And then one night I saw him. I was taking out the trash when I noticed movement at the edge of our property, right near our water meter. A man was standing there, hunched over. At first, I thought he was just checking something on his phone, but when he saw me, he quickly turned away and walked off toward the street. "Everything okay?" I called out. The man stiffened. "Just walking the dog," he replied without looking back. But as he disappeared into the night, a chill ran down my spine. Because I knew exactly who he was. Doug Thompson, Karen's husband. And there was no dog. The next morning, I mentioned the encounter to our neighbor, Elaine Rodriguez, who lived across the street. Elaine lowered her voice. "The Thompsons don't even have a dog." A cold knot of dread formed in my stomach. "You think he was messing with our water?" I asked, the words tasting like poison in my mouth. Elaine hesitated, then leaned in closer. "I don't want to scare you, Alex, but Karen has a history of going after people who oppose her. Your mom was the only one who spoke up against the dues increase last year, remember?" I did. My mother had stood up in front of the entire HOA meeting and told Karen she was bleeding the neighborhood dry. And now, she was the only one getting sick. That night, I grabbed a flashlight and inspected the area near our water meter. The soil looked disturbed, as if someone had recently dug there. And then, as I moved the flashlight across the rocks, I saw it, small droplets of blue liquid. I crouched down and touched it with my gloved hand. It smelled sweet. A sinking feeling settled in my gut. I took out my phone and snapped a few photos. Then, I did what I should have done weeks ago. I installed a hidden security camera angled directly at the water meter. If Doug came back, I'd have proof. It only took 2 nights before my camera caught something. At exactly 2:13 a.m., Doug appeared again. He crouched near the water meter, pulled a small bottle from his jacket, and poured its contents into our water line. I watched the footage, my hands shaking with rage. He was poisoning my mother. I wasted no time. I filled a sample jar from our kitchen tap and drove it to a water testing lab first thing in the morning. That evening, my phone rang. "Alex, this is Dave from the lab. I ran a quick test on your sample. You need to listen to me carefully." "Go ahead," I said, heart hammering in my chest. "Your water contains ethylene glycol. It's antifreeze." The words hit me like a sledgehammer. "Are you sure?" I whispered. 100%. It's toxic in even small amounts. If someone's been drinking it over time, it could cause kidney failure, organ damage. My mother. I didn't even let him finish. I grabbed the security footage, the lab results, and drove straight to the police station. I was done playing by Karen's rules. Now it was my turn. I slammed the car door shut and stormed into the police station, gripping the lab results and security footage like a lifeline. Detective Martinez looked up from her desk, eyebrows raised. "I need to file a report. Now." My voice came out sharper than I intended, but I didn't care. She sighed, gesturing for me to sit. "What's the issue?" I dropped the printed lab report onto her desk. "My mother is in the hospital because of this. Antifreeze. In our water. And I have video proof of Doug Thompson poisoning our supply. ****. She picked up the report, skimmed through it, then replayed the footage on my phone. I expected shock, outrage, immediate action. Instead, she frowned. "This video shows someone near your water meter, but it doesn't clearly show what's in the bottle." My stomach turned. Was she serious? "I have chemical proof that ethylene glycol is in our water." Martinez folded her hands. "Trace amounts of chemicals can enter water systems in a lot of ways, Mr. Carson. And without clear footage of Doug actually pouring antifreeze into your supply, this could be circumstantial." My pulse pounded in my ears. "So, you're telling me someone can literally poison my mother, and there's nothing you're going to do?" Martinez exhaled. "We'll investigate. But without stronger proof, we can't make an arrest yet." The helpless rage inside me boiled over. I had proof. I had the damn evidence. And they were still protecting Karen and Doug. I stalked out of the station, my mind already racing. If the police wouldn't handle this, then I would. And I knew exactly where to start. That night, I called my college roommate, Jamie, who now worked as an environmental lawyer. "Jamie, I need you to help me destroy my HOA." There was a pause. "Okay, now you have my attention." I told him everything. Karen's harassment, the poisoning, the ignored evidence. Jamie whistled. "That's beyond HOA drama, man. That's attempted murder. And the cops won't do a damn thing about it." I expected him to be as frustrated as I was. Instead, his voice shifted, cool, calculating. "Tell me about Pinecrest Gardens' water supply." That threw me. "What? Who provides your water?" "The city." I hesitated. "No, it's some private company. Clearwater LLC, I think." Jamie laughed, and it sent a chill through me. "Then we might have just found your nuclear option." He explained. Clearwater LLC was a private water supplier, which meant they owned the water rights for the entire neighborhood. And if someone were to buy them out, they'd control the HOA's water supply. I felt my heart slam against my ribs. Can that even be done? It'll take money. A lot of it. But Clearwater is bankrupt. If we move fast, you could buy it for cheap. ****. I didn't even hesitate. Find out how much. Because if I owned their water, Karen and Doug wouldn't just be in trouble. They'd be at my mercy. The next morning, I emptied my savings, cashed out my 401k, and applied for a home equity loan. The bank manager raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure you want to do this?" I didn't blink. Absolutely. Within a week, I was in a sterile conference room, signing the final documents. "Congratulations, Mr. Carson," the bankruptcy lawyer said, sliding the last papers toward me. "You now own Clearwater LLC, including the water rights to Pinecrest Gardens." I gripped the folder in my hands, the weight of it sinking in. I had control. And now, it was time to make Karen and her cronies suffer. At 6 a.m. the next morning, I sent official notices to every HOA board member. Effective immediately. Water rates will increase by 400% for all HOA members. All delinquent accounts will face immediate shutoffs. By 8 a.m., my phone exploded. Malcolm Reed, the HOA treasurer, called 6 times. Karen? 12. I let them all go to voicemail. At noon, a familiar black SUV screeched to a stop in front of my house. Karen jumped out, red-faced with rage, waving the notice in the air. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" she shrieked. I leaned against the doorframe, cool and collected. "Managing my business," I said. "Just like you manage the HOA." Her nostrils flared. "This is illegal. You can't just cut off our water." I smirked. "Actually, I can." Karen paled. She knew I wasn't bluffing. "What do you want?" she finally hissed. I folded my arms. 3 things. A full confession of what she and Doug did to my mother. Their immediate resignation from the HOA. Full financial restitution for my mother's medical bills. Her mouth pressed into a thin line. "You're insane. I'll give you 24 hours. And then, I closed the door in her face. That night, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Check your email." I frowned but opened my inbox. A video attachment sat there with no explanation. I clicked play. Karen and Doug stood in their garage, arguing. "They can't prove anything," Doug was saying. He lifted a jug of antifreeze, unscrewed the cap, and poured it into a smaller bottle. Karen crossed her arms. "Just a few drops in the right places, and problem neighbors solve themselves." My blood went ice cold. This was it. This was the proof the cops needed. I forwarded the video to every HOA member, the police, and the local news. Within an hour, my street was filled with flashing red and blue lights. Karen and Doug were dragged out of their house in handcuffs. I watched from my porch, arms crossed. As they shoved Karen into the back of a squad car, her eyes locked onto mine. For the first time, she looked afraid. I leaned in, voice low. "You should have read the fine print." And then, as the car doors slammed shut, I turned away. Because this was only the beginning of their nightmare. The flashing lights of police cruisers painted the night red and blue, casting sharp shadows on the pristine homes of Pine Crest Gardens. Neighbors gathered on their porches, watching as Karen and Doug Thompson were dragged from their home in handcuffs. Karen, once the picture of arrogant authority, now looked like a cornered animal. As the officers read Doug his rights, he sneered at me. "You think this is over? You have no idea who you're messing with." Karen remained silent, her expression eerily blank. The lead detective, Martinez, approached me. This time, she wasn't dismissive. "We searched their garage," she said, flipping through her notepad. "We found 6 bottles of antifreeze, one with a modified spout. Lab results confirm it matches the chemicals found in your mother's water." I exhaled, feeling my knees almost buckle with relief. "And the video?" I asked. She nodded. "It's damning. But just to be sure, we're running a full forensic analysis. With your testimony and the evidence, we're looking at felony charges." I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt something else. I wanted more. Because Karen and Doug hadn't just tried to kill my mother. They had gotten away with hurting others before us. And I wanted them to pay for every single victim. The following morning, I walked outside to find something strange. A crowd had gathered on my lawn. Neighbors, people I had only seen in passing before. Elaine Rodriguez stepped forward, holding an envelope stuffed with cash. "We took up a collection, Alex," she said, voice thick with emotion. "For your mother's medical bills." I opened the envelope. Over $1,400 in cash and checks. I swallowed hard, feeling something tighten in my chest. "I thank you." Elaine put a hand on my arm. "You stood up to them when no one else could. We should have done something sooner." Asterisk, asterisk. A murmur of agreement swept through the crowd. And then, someone else spoke up. An older man, Mr. Jenkins, stepped forward. My dog died suddenly last month, he admitted, after Karen threatened me over my lawn decorations. The vet couldn't explain why. Another neighbor, Mrs. Patel, lifted her hand. My son was sick for weeks after we fought over our fence height, she whispered. When we switched to bottled water, he got better. The realization sank in. This wasn't just about my mother. Karen had been poisoning the neighborhood for years, and no one had connected the dots until now. I clenched my fists. I wasn't just going to take her down. I was going to erase her entire legacy. Karen and Doug's preliminary hearing was standing room only. They sat at the defendant's table, pale and drawn, their once perfect image in tatters. The prosecutor laid out the charges: felony poisoning, attempted murder, aggravated assault. The judge glanced at them before setting bail at $500,000 each. Doug's lawyer immediately objected, but the judge shut him down. This was a calculated act against multiple victims, he said. Bail stands. Karen finally snapped. She lurched forward, grabbing her lawyer's sleeve. This isn't fair, she hissed. That video, it's fake. It's all lies. Alex is manipulating everyone. The prosecutor calmly pulled out the evidence binder. Mrs. Thompson, she said, flipping to the journal found in Karen's nightstand. Would you like to explain why you kept detailed records of every problem neighbor you targeted? Karen's face drained of color. Doug slammed his fist against the table. I want a plea deal. His lawyer tried to quiet him, but he ignored her. If I testify against Karen, can I get a reduced sentence? Karen's head snapped toward him, eyes burning with betrayal. But it was too late. The prosecutor smiled. Let's talk. Within a month, the HOA completely collapsed. 3 other board members resigned after text messages surfaced, proving they had discussed my mother's mysterious illness, but refused to act. Malcolm Reed, the HOA treasurer, called me in a panic. Alex, you have to believe me. I didn't know what they were doing. I swear. I let the silence stretch. Did you help cover it up? I finally asked. His breath caught. And that was all the answer I needed. The next day, Malcolm and 2 other board members put their houses up for sale. No one bought them. And the HOA? It was dismantled completely, replaced by a community-run council. Their first act? Permanently exempting my mother's house from HOA rules. Their second act? Renaming the community garden after her. My mother came home after 63 days in the hospital. As our car pulled into the driveway, dozens of neighbors lined the street, clapping. Elaine and her husband had cleaned our house, stocked the fridge, and, to my surprise, replaced all of my father's gnomes. 20 new ones stood proudly in the garden. Elaine smiled. We thought you'd like to rebuild the collection. Tears pricked my mother's eyes. They're perfect. Karen and Doug eventually took a plea deal, 12 years each. During the sentencing, my mother was given a chance to speak. She stood, frail but unshaken. I forgive you, she said softly, but I will never forget. Karen stared at the table, refusing to meet her gaze. The judge nodded. Sentencing stands. Court adjourned. And just like that, it was over.